Hi students, welcome to Vijayata IAS Academy. We are discussing an editorial given in the Hindu newspaper. The contents of this editorial you can use in mains also, you can use in prelims as well. In case of mains, a question can be asked like this and you can use the contents of this editorial, some of the contents of this editorial. Question you can practice like, in the context of growing tensions between Western countries and Russia, what are the challenges for India in securing its strategic interests? So this kind of question can be asked and some of the contents of this editorial can be answered for this question. And with respect to prelims, you should take note of some of the terms given in this editorial like S-400 missile system, geographic location of Ukraine, where it is located, and some of the regions of Ukraine which are in news, and Black Sea, it is near to Black Sea, sharing the border with Black Sea, and CAATSA and NATO. So these are the terms important for prelims point of view. Let us see. Here the news is, it is going on for many days now. So here the news is between Ukraine and Russia in this particular location. Conflict is going on in this region. Now let us see what are the contents given in the editorial. Here it is saying that Russian President Vladimir Putin has played a major move by announcing formal recognition for the Donbas region enclaves of Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine, one which changes the course of the present diplomatic efforts. So for the past few weeks, so there is continuous conflict in this particular region and some diplomatic exchanges are also going on between Western countries and Russia also. Now recent development is, in this region separatist forces were there. Now the claims of these separatist forces are recognized by Russia. So this is the news. In this context, this editorial is given. So this editorial is clearly saying in one line the objective of this conflict. Putin's actions are aimed at wresting from the West guarantees against NATO expansion. So it is surrounding, our central theme of this conflict is about NATO expansion. So this is saying that, editorial is saying that his actions are aimed at guaranteeing against NATO expansion. So here this is the conflict zone. NATO was created during Cold War times and it gradually expanded in the eastern direction. After Cold War in 1991, it expanded further into different areas and it became closer to Russian territory. Now this became bone of contention between Russia and NATO. Here editorial is talking about implications. This particular recognition of separatist forces as separate independent republics has some implications. So editorial is explaining these implications. It signals that Russia is no longer interested in talks on the basis of Minsk Accords. This issue is, this was in news in 2014 also. In 2014 and 15, civil war situation did arise in Ukraine. And in that situation, Minsk agreements were signed between Ukraine government and the rebel groups. And it had secured a special status for the Donbas enclaves. So it has secured special status and recognizing the autonomy of this particular region. So it was the part of Minsk agreements. So far, the situation was relying hopes on Minsk agreements. But now, by recognizing and sending the troops into this region, now it is like discarding this Minsk Accord. So it becomes irrelevant at this present situation. Mr. Putin has also ordered Russian peacekeepers into the region. So army, military also entered into this region. A move. Now implications, now if Russian forces enter into this region, naturally it is going to trigger impact on the Ukraine side as well. That could spark off conflict with Ukrainian troops. Mr. Putin may claim that his move is far short of the invasion that US and its NATO allies have been warning about and should not incur any further hostilities from Ukraine. If this creates more hostilities, now both will fire the arms and now for so many days there is a danger. It was discussed so much in the newspapers that if any war arises, millions of people, thousands of people die, and millions of people will become refugees in eastern part of the Europe. So this kind of implication will be there if this triggers hostilities with the Ukrainian forces. Now, what is the main demand in this particular conflict? Mr. Putin's move is a clear sign that the situation is not going to be managed or handled without NATO sitting down to serious negotiations over the security guarantees and some discussion about how to regulate the expansion of NATO to Russia's neighboring countries. Like this. Here you can see the NATO enlargement. Here in 1949, it was created in 1949. It was the time period of Cold War. Entire world was divided into two blocks. Cold War means it was the Cold War between Western bloc led by capitalist countries and Eastern bloc led by communist countries. Communist country leader was Russia and Western countries leader was USA. So during Cold War, to counter communist influence, they created NATO. After 1991, Cold War ended. USSR also disintegrated into many countries. After that also, NATO continuously expanded into eastern parts of Europe. So this has triggered issue with Russia. Now Russia is feeling threatened because NATO forces are on its borders now. Now Ukraine is the only main country which was culturally, linguistically, ethnically closer to Russia, what Russia claims. And now if Ukraine also becomes part of NATO, then entire border of Russia come under threat. So it became like an existential threat for Russia. Under these circumstances, Russia is demanding that Ukraine should not become part of NATO. That is the main demand. Now NATO is not coming to negotiation table. Now Russia is taking aggressive steps. So this article is saying that his move is a clear sign that situation is not going to be managed or handled without NATO sitting down to serious negotiations over security guarantees. So these are the things which have to be sorted out. He has been demanding security guarantees for decades, for 2 decades. So for the last 2 decades, Russia is continuously raising this issue. US and its European allies to decide whether they would react to the situation or the sanctions. Either they can react with sanctions, already they started imposing sanctions, or military action, or return to the diplomatic table. Now Western allies of US and its allies have these 3 type of options. One is reacting with sanctions, already they started. Now military action, now NATO forces are also getting ready. But ultimate solution is only through diplomatic table. That is the peaceful solution. In this context, now what is the impact on India? So this editorial is talking about Pakistan angle also, and how India what is the response of India, how it is uprising India's response. It is talking that for New Delhi, the escalation in tensions comes at a particularly sensitive time. Here, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has been traveling to Germany and France, and while he has tried to shift the focus of his European interlocutors to the Indo-Pacific, it is Russia's actions that dominate the conversation. So here in this context, India also became part of informal summit of Quad. From the last week, we have seen news related to Quad also. The main area of focus of Quad was to secure India's strategic interest in Indo-Pacific region. Now, our External Affairs Minister is trying to create awareness about the important issues in Indo-Pacific region, and he is trying to highlight India's concerns in our neighboring areas, and also trying to highlight India's concerns with respect to our neighbors. In this context, now Russia's issue highlighted. Now, Pakistan on the other hand, in addition, Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan is visiting Moscow. The first visit by a Pakistani PM in over 2 decades, and New Delhi is watching the new ties closely. Now you can see this. On one hand, India has issues with China on its border. India is not having good relations with Pakistan and China. Now India is joining with the Quad also informally. Now it is trying to highlight the security concerns world over. Now in this context, recently China improving its close relations with Moscow, and now Pakistan is also trying to improve relations with Moscow. Now you can see how in our neighborhood we are not having good relations, good ties with Pakistan and China, with our two neighbors. Russia is all weather friendly for India. Now if we antagonize Russia, it becomes a major challenge for our security. That's why we have to choose our responses calibrately, and we should choose the response very creatively in this particular growing environment. Now this is what the challenge for India's strategic interests. So Pakistan is trying to improve relations with Russia. Russia is trying to improve relations with China. Now India is having security threat from both China and Pakistan. Now if we antagonize Russia, it becomes a major threat for India's internal security and external security. So this is the major challenge. Now, and also the delivery of Russian S-400 missile system is underway. Russia is delivering S-400 missile system. It is very essential for India's defense purpose. The US administration is still to decide whether to waive or impose CAATSA sanctions against India. So earlier these sanctions were not imposed on India, so we could import S-400 missile system. Now already due to this issue in Eastern Europe, now already sanctions are being imposed on Russia by the US. Now India should play a diplomatic role where India will not attract these sanctions. If we attract sanctions from USA, we cannot import S-400 missile system. It will compromise our defense, and already we are having a hostile neighborhood. So these are the issues, these are the challenges. Here CAATSA means countering America's adversaries through Sanctions Act, CAATSA. So this is an act passed by America. So according to this, America tries to counter its adversaries through sanctions. This is CAATSA Act. So now India's response. Already India gave statement in UNSC. Now India's statement is at UNSC that appealed for diplomacy and de-escalation. India always go for United Nations approach or the diplomatic approach for de-escalation and to resolve the conflicts, while making no critical comment about Mr. Putin's announcement. It is not just an assertion of India's traditional principled position. So this is the appraisal given by the Hindu editorial. It is saying that India's traditional principled position is to always maintain this particular kind of diplomatic effort, this diplomatic statement, or a study in pragmatism, but also a reflection of the difficult position. It is also a difficult position for New Delhi finds itself in over the conflict, which appears to have now entered a new phase. So it was always traditional principled approach. India always maintains at international fora. Wherever there is conflict in the world, India always maintains that diplomacy and peaceful negotiation is the only solution. So in this case also India appealed for it, and both sides India appealed for peaceful solution between two parties. So this is about this particular editorial. So you can practice that particular question, that in the context of growing tensions between Western European countries and Russia, now how India what are the challenges for India's strategic interests and how India can secure these strategic interests. So this is about editorial given in the Hindu newspaper. Thank you.